Presenting NMA in the 21st century.
Specifically, every NMA was required to change with the changing times, even if clinging to unchanging principles.
As I came to the Maritime this beautiful day, I refused to see the rain. I could only see showers of blessing on this very distinguished group of young men and women.
So when we came in the NMA itself, there was the staff of the NMA, there is no condition of service. No condition of service at all.
Serious people who want, shipping is not a poor man's business. It's not, yes. It's not an all-commerce game.
Government is also committed. Mr. President has approved the establishment of inland ports. Private investors are welcome. We are looking for these investors.
The imposing headquarters of the National Maritime Authority in Lagos after an expensive facelift. This all-round refurbishment and bold architecture just managed to reveal the apparent determination of NMA's incumbent management to effect critical change and refocus maritime practice in Nigeria for good.
Then finally, when you are from the kind of place I come from, in festivals, the big masquerade comes out last.
And the big masquerade in NMA's leadership today is none other than top PDP stalwart Alhaji Lawal Kaita as governing board chairman. For hands-on management, an emerging technocrat, architect by profession, Ferdinand as director general, and the board members.
In this documentary, we see that NMA's 15 years of maritime regulation has been full of activity. Though what operators say they remember most about NMA is the 3% levy collection of merchant vessels that call our Nigerian seaports. But that is not all. The authority has as well registered over 200 shipping companies as operators. It has given loans worth over $120 million to Nigerian shipping lines for the purchase of ships. And for many years, it shared cargo among industry operatives. Apart from its contribution to seafarer training, now the authority has embarked on what it calls repositioning.
For what we have to do to return back to reckoning.
Established in 1987, NMA had never experienced the impact of party politics until Nigeria's present democratic dispensation started in 1999. There is now, therefore, a new drive to seek a widely acceptable implementation of the national shipping policy.
In that regime, it might have been risky to do so under the army, but I'll certainly assure you that under the current leadership in the country, you wouldn't be instructed to apply public funds by fiat, and if you had a conscientious objection and you raised it, it would be appropriately considered.
Nigeria's National Shipping Policy Decree set up the National Maritime Authority to, among other aims, correct any imbalance in the Nigerian shipping trade, especially relating to the UNCTAD 40-40-20 cargo sharing formula. Due to the changing demands of international merchant marine, the national shipping policy is currently under scrutiny. It is seriously undergoing diverse repositioning to better articulate the entire spectrum of maritime activities for Nigeria.
Yeah, I believe that in terms of the growth of our maritime, the oil and gas sector is a very important source of growth, an area of growth. Yes. Like I said earlier on, the figures we're getting from the NNPC indicate that we could have oil in commercial quantities for another 35 years or thereabouts, and gas another 7 to 8 years, based on proven reserves.
Today, the National Maritime Authority opens up new vistas of sea trade activities, promising new engagement for sailors, marine engineers, naval architects and surveyors to launch out further afield.
Nigerian shipping lines actually freighted less than 10% of the totality of cargo generated by our aggregate economy, and this is very sad indeed. But maritime is not just about lifting of cargo or discharging of cargo alone. There are so many areas which are attached to cargo lifting. For instance, the Nigerian shipping lines are not so much into bonded warehouse. They are not so much into terminal operations, which is the hinting that brings a lot of revenue to shipping lines. They are not also so much into stevedoring. I see them do petty stevedoring, but not the major stevedoring. When you are talking about discharge of heavy lifts, you are talking about discharge of rigs. You're also talking about pipes.
We have strategized and focused on onshore services.
Yeah.
As you know, this is an era of globalization, and that means that business have become more competitive. So we have been able to satisfy our clients and customers by equipping our port with modern equipment to handle our containers. This is how we meet the new global challenge.
The National Maritime Authority is only one among the 11 other agencies and parastatals in the Federal Ministry of Transport, whose headquarters is in Abuja. Only few of these agencies, like the Nigerian Ports Authority, the NMA, Shippers Council, and a few others, earn revenue directly from the marketplace. The rest are regulatory bodies like the Joint Dock Labour Industrial Council, or schools like the NITT, which must be supported by government financial allocations. The NMA is about the youngest in the family, and the lack of a well-established administrative culture in the past led her open to operational weaknesses.
NMA came into being in 1987 in the heat of the Bwangtang code of 40-40-20 era. That was what was reigning in the maritime industry, the whole world. And they came to protect that thing. That is no longer applicable in today's maritime industry. And so they seem to have lost focus. When the government asks for NMA to be restructured and repositioned,
Yes.
it is partly because there is a general desire by this government, and in particular the President and the Minister, to align our operations to the fundamental ethics of transparency and accountability. Every department of government, with the arrival of Mr. President in May 1999, ought to know that it had to reorientate itself to become far more accountable.
Following closely on its promulgation in 1987, the NMA opened her first offices in 1988 at Obalende in Lagos. Much of the activity in those years centered around cargo support administration.
I was only given 250,000 naira as a one-line vote for starting the Maritime Authority. We had no office, we had nothing. And my appointment was with immediate effect. So I proceeded. I had a board. There was no money. So I had to discuss with my board on borrowing from the private sector, private funds, to carry out that assignment. And I will not hesitate to tell you, the former Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji, came to our rescue. The man gave us 1 million as a loan. And what were the collaterals? Only a promise from me that they will hold our foreign exchange reserves as a collateral. Did the job. Happily for us, we introduced the payment by shipping lines of the 3% of earning from the industry. Within 2 years, we had over $60 million. I repeat, $60 million in Abakiti.
You well know, of course, that the NMA ought to have done better than it has done. So far as I can judge, I'm not blaming the current helmsmen and women at the helm of affairs of NMA. I don't think that many Nigerians are quite impressed with the record of the NMA in terms of fostering or shall I say protecting or preserving the Nigerian interest in the current trade of Africa, of West Africa. In fact, it's amazing that a country like Cote d'Ivoire comparatively has done better than Nigeria in this regard. But thus far, I think in recent times, the NMA seems to have got its act together. At least since 1999, we have seen that there's a positive direction. However, I will expect that the NMA will do better in the area of being a think tank, being a real clearing house, being the motivating power in the maritime industry in Nigeria. It should take the lead.
Aside from the motivating factors underlying Nigeria's maritime sector, national and international politics affected NMA operations from the beginning. Foreign shipping lines resented the idea of Nigeria's NMA securing cargo for indigenous lines, a process that used to be free for all, as well as the added caveat of a 3% levy on ship calls.
I recall I was a participant at the first Nigerian Economic Summit, where we deliberated on a lot of things, and I was in the shipping group. We had a lot of foreign participation at the time, representatives of companies, big companies like Maersk Line and the rest of them. The cargo sharing formula, as you know, was 40-40-20, so it should have been favorable to everybody. But they hated it, they didn't like it. I'm talking of our foreign friends. To the extent that they wanted to make an insertion at the communique that we recommended that the Maritime Authority should be scrapped. And of course, to us in the industry, the indigenous ones, that was a pointer that, yes, NMA was useful.
Locally, it helps to understand NMA better when considered that from inception, it never operated under a democratic civilian government until President Obasanjo's second tenure in May 1999. The military regimes, beginning from General Ibrahim Babangida, called the shots in those years. Bowing to government pressure in 1996, the agency headquarters was moved to Abuja. This made interaction with Lagos-based maritime operators all the more cumbersome. Problem that lasted till 1999, when government reversed the order and NMA moved back to its well-known offices at 4 Boma Road, Apapa in Lagos.
Now, specifically too, every NMA was required to change with the changing times, even if clinging to unchanging principles. For instance, we had become rather uncompetitive in seaborne trade. Now we are focusing on coastal trade. We had become a bit, we did not receive too much compliment for our work ethics. Now we are trying to promote some modicum of corporate governance to ensure that you have your procedures are right, your work ethics is right, and that the staff are properly focused.
Mr. Ferdinand Ago studied architecture at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. A vanguard among the youth section of the ruling PDP, he was 40 in the year 2000 when he was appointed to the position, the youngest of all his predecessors.
Can you say he's coping well compared to his predecessors?
Certainly, the architect Ago has an advantage. Apart from the fact that he's very, very assertive, he is also very humble, and I think this has to do with his upbringing. And he's very accessible, and most of the operators like him. So he wants to like somebody, at least even where he has a shortcoming somewhere, it is likely that people will overlook it. So he's coping very well.
Well, he's a young man, he's a young architect, Van Agu, really very pushful, I would say, and I think I like him. He works very hard, yes.
Succeeding chief executives of NMA have tackled the problem of improving indigenous participation in international sea trade from different angles. Nigeria accounts for at least 60% of the total sea trade in the West African sub-region. Between 1993 and 1995, the federal government approved the NMA to spend over $100 million from her ship acquisition fund to buy vessels for 10 indigenous shipping lines. and to help pave the way for the early national carrier NNSL. Whether the effort has been justified by increased local participation is another matter entirely.
I believe that it has indeed progressed the course of Nigerian shipping like no other facility could have done. It has created the opportunity indeed for people to move from being a paper and office entity to being proficient ship managers.
Captain Emmanuel Ihenacho is the managing director of Genesis Worldwide Shipping, one of the 10 favored shipping lines to get the loan. He is also the executive secretary of the Nigerian Shipping Companies Association. In 1995, Genesis received $2.5 million from NMA for the purchase of MV Genesis Pioneer, but the Ship Acquisition Fund, which ought to be a revolving fund to sustain the facility, was suspended in 1996 by General Sani Abacha, then head of state, on charges of poor management by the NMA. Today, the fund is being carefully refloated as a fleet expansion program.
In any new venture that you are undertaking, you have to factor in the possibility that there would be problems in the learning curve, and this is what we have experienced. But by and large, when you look at companies like my company, for instance, yes, we have moved from being an office entity dreaming about what it would be like to be a ship management company to being a proficient ship manager.
The Ship Acquisition and Shipbuilding Fund, yes, as administered in the past, was done largely by executive fiat. Decisions as to who got what and what amount, why and when, was made by authorities outside the NMA. Okay. The NMA basically obeyed instructions given to it. So I think the biggest hindrance, the biggest mistake of that era was that the fund decisions were not made inside the NMA.
NMA now works in greater consultation with industry stakeholders. Here, participation of local sea traders in the oil and gas haulage subsector is on the front burner. Indigenous shipping lines have long campaigned against the monopoly in the lifting of Nigerian crude oil by the oil majors. Technically, the Nigerian government current terms of sale, which is free on board FOB, means that the crude oil buyers overseas nominate who carries the oil. Nigerian tanker trade lobbyists therefore want a change of the status quo.
The second option, of course, is to walk through the National Oil Corporation and ask them to sell the oil on a cost and freight basis. And that shortens the entry period for Nigerians, because it simply means that you have captured also, apart from the profits that you make in selling the oil, you have also captured the business end of transporting the oil.
I would like to advise that people take a very close look at the maritime sector, particularly like I mentioned earlier on, the offshore support services. Okay. It's an area of growth that can sustain for a long time. However, it is not an area with very high internal rate of return. It's not like taking $1 million to import juice and turn it over in 6 months and rush out again to Southeast Asia. No, that's not it. We're talking about the real sector.
Aside from the tanker trade, NMA operations in the new century are set to expand into more areas such as port states control. The delivery of these marine pollution monitoring boats gives teeth to the agency's preparations to implement aspects of ISM code and other IMO conventions that require physical presence on the waterfront and in territorial waters. The rest of the enforcing fleet will be deployed to search and rescue.
Well, as I told you at sea, we received information that a distress signal from a ship that had a problem. I think there was an explosion in the engine room and some people were injured. So we had to go to rescue those who were injured to make sure they get them to hospital. And actually it was an exercise for training purposes.
Since 2001, the Nigerian authorities have directed the full merger of both GIS and NMA, a process that entails the joining of their founding legislation. At the juncture of the merger proper, it is time to call in the veterans.
We can also look at the assistance of people like Captain Yagwan. One of the first people that mooted the idea of a merger almost 8 years ago was himself.
Captain Niagwan may well have begun the process, quite all right, but his generation of master mariners are now graying and close to retirement, although they have got the needed ideas. Here, the authority has invited Captain Edward Agbakoba, a former GIS, to give a talk to GIS officials who would be joining their colleagues at the Maritime Services Department of NMA.
The DG has said a lot of things, so possibly the only thing I may stress here is the duties of the maritime administration.
In the course of time, the NMA has also been saddled with manpower training and general maritime education as part of the overall goal of improving national participation in international shipping. And this is the preparatory center for seafarer training in Nigeria today, the Maritime Academy of Nigeria, Oron, in Akwa Ibom State.
The Transport Secretary of the United States and the Minister of Government in Israel, this discussion suggests that these two great countries have promised to show some interest in what is taking place here by way of support.
Graduates of this school are programmed to be employed in ships for local, coastal and foreign-going trades. The NMA is mandated to fund activities here at the school's laboratory and other classroom aids and for the purchase of books.
NMA in the recent past released 90 million naira as seed money for the tarring of the Academy's internal roads. The NMA has also provided funds for the renovation of the jetty in the Academy's boatyard. It has provided 60 million naira for the supply and installation of laboratory equipment for the HND Marine Engineering Program.
A major development for NMA took place when a new board was appointed for it in 2000. The former governing boards in 1988 and 1993 had been short-lived.
If I walk around and say, oh, this is the chairman, NMA full of dollars everywhere. Since I came to NMA, I have not seen a single dollar except when I go on overseas tour. I have never seen a dollar here in NMA.
The current 11-man NMA governing board is composed of representatives from the Federal Ministry of Transport, the Federal Ministry of Finance, the Nigerian Navy, the Nigerian Shipping Community, other nominees of the federal government, and a secretary who is appointed by the board.
A lot has been lost for us. So when we came in the NMA itself, the staff of the NMA, there is no condition of service. No condition of service at all. No salary structure, no pension scheme, nothing. So it is during these 2 years that we had to establish a condition of service, the pension schemes, and all the procedure for promotion and so on and so on.
Often, the NMA's cardinal mandate of improving Nigeria's participation in international shipping translates into mediation between the interests of younger Nigerian carriers and that of foreign mega carriers. It is a task that demands delicate balancing. The now suspended cargo allocation scheme was a typical example of the contention between foreign and indigenous shipping interests in Nigeria.
Now, the impact of NMA towards the shipping operators in Nigeria is now less because of, since the abrogation of cargo allocation. Still, their role is very important, and in my opinion, they are trying so much. I see NMA in NMA a good organization.
People took advantage of the system, especially on the cargo allocations. If the system worked as it should, then the allocations could have been done properly and shipping in Nigeria could have been developed, but the way things worked out, unfortunately, a lot of the things went by the wayside.
At a certain point in time, NMA felt that they had adequate manpower to be able to carry out this exercise. So they now took over. And when they took over, I mean, naturally, those who haven't got the experience, didn't know exactly how to go about it.
We don't even carry up to 10% of the cargo that we either import or export. So foreign shipping lines play a very vital role in our economy, and we don't seek to antagonize them.
Today, in preparation for the challenges of the new millennium, the NMA is also refocusing its information management system. It has embarked on the training and retraining of her staff to cope with the demands of shipping in a computer-driven, knowledge-based world environment. For NMA, the future beckons with challenges. filled with different hopes for different operators. How these objectives will be achieved and their impact on the industry is another interesting question for Nigerian shipping lines, for foreign shipping operators, and for the vibrant crop of Nigeria's elite who now command the sector.
The key element is that the new scheme should and will be free of political abuse. It should and will be free of favoritism. Projects must be assessed very critically. Risks should be properly assessed.